Hello, so today we'll be starting with the next chapter that we have under civics, judiciary. Right, so judiciary is the next organ that we'll be studying under the three organs amongst which power has been divided in India. So I've asked this question so many times, so I'll just ask it again. So power is divided between which three organs? Like I said, it should have happened by now. This should be a question that you are very familiar with, right? So power is divided, or there is a separation of powers between which three organs in India? Just think about it. I'll give you some time. Right. So the answer is, like we have said many times before, legislature, executive, and the third is judiciary. Judiciary is what we'll be learning today, okay? So power is divided between legislature, executive, and judiciary. We are already done with legislature and executive. Now we'll be moving on to judiciary, okay? So what do we mean by judiciary? Who is this body? What are the parts of this body? Who all are included? Is there anything additional that we learn when we learn about judiciary? All of that will be covered today. So coming to the introduction, basically judiciary in our country refers to the system of courts and tribunals responsible for the administration of justice in the country, okay? So basically what do we mean by judiciary? It is the system of courts and tribunals who are responsible for the administration of justice in the country. What do we mean by tribunals? Tribunals are basically similar to courts, basically bodies that, pass judgments and settle disputes. Okay, so similar to a court. Right, so when we talk about judiciary, we are referring to all of these systems. Basically, they're like the word suggests, judiciary. Their administration, it's about being judicial, right? What are they responsible for? The administration of justice in the country, to make sure that justice is given in the country. It is an independent branch of the government entrusted with interpreting and applying the law, safeguarding individual rights, resolving disputes, and ensuring the rule of law. So they are an independent branch. This is something that we have said before. So power is divided between three bodies: legislature, executive, judiciary, and three of these are independent. None of these is above the other, and that is very important, because if there was a hierarchy, let's say legislature was above executive, which was above judiciary, right? If there's a hierarchy, then what happens? Naturally, judiciary ends up having less power than executive, which ends up having less power than legislature, right? So obviously that's not something that you want to have happened, right? So there is an issue there, and even if there is some correlation between all three powers, that could also lead to a lot of issues, right? So that is not an ideal situation at all, which is why in India, as per the law, you keep it as independent as possible. Three independent bodies, okay? So basically, it is an independent branch. Now, what are the work that they do? One, they interpret and apply the law. This is why you see a law book. So it's like their holy book, their Bible, right? So they interpret and apply the law. They safeguard individual rights. So basically, if there are individual rights of people, as in, for example, your fundamental rights, it's your individual right, your freedom to speech and expression, your freedom to education, or your right to education, basically. So all of these, you need to make sure that it's maintained. So that also comes under the work of the judiciary, to safeguard individual rights, to resolve disputes and ensure the rule of law. All of this comes under the judiciary, resolving disputes, ensuring the rule of law. All of this comes under who? The judiciary, okay? And this, do you guys know this figure? This is called, basically, so it's called, I'm not sure if your generation has seen it. I mean, your generation would be my generation. Anyway, the point is, like, so this is basically a balance. It's basically that. So you see these two balances, these two things, okay, they will be on both sides. So what happens is, it's a balance. So if you put something of more weight here, this goes down and this would come up. And if you put something of more weight here, this goes down and this would come up. That's how the balance works. So in earlier times, it was used to sort of understand the weight of things. So see, now to understand the weight, you have something called a weighing machine, right? You just need to put it on the weighing machine. But earlier what they used to do was, okay, so if I have, let's say 10 kg rice, but I do not know the weight is 10 kg. How do I check if the weight is 10 kg? Basically, here on this thing, I will put a 10 kg stone. So they would have like stones, basically like bricks that were shaped almost like this, either like a hexagon or a circle, mostly a hexagon, right? And then there would be written 10 here. I mean, this is not exactly important to the chapter, but I thought I'll just explain it because it's interesting. Because when you talk about judiciary or when you talk about courts, justice, this is the figure that is usually used. And usually, there's like a woman or a man standing behind, blindfolded. I'll get to that, but before that, yeah, so basically the system is that, so you will have a stone or a brick, okay, of 10 kg. If it is of 10 kg, so basically what happens is that if you put a brick of 10 kg here, if the object that's given here, like for example, let's say it's 2 kg rice, so this 10 kg brick is heavier, right? Since it's heavier, it would go down. So when this goes down and this goes up, you know that this rice is less than 10 kg. But that's not enough. You want to know the exact weight of the rice, right? So what do? You remove the 10 kg brick and you put a 5 kg brick. So you know that the rice is less than 10 kg. So you then think, okay, let me try with 5 kg. So when you put the 5 kg brick, the distance will reduce. Basically, this will come up a little, but still it will be up below the rice, right? So since it's below the rice, you know that this piece that you have of 5 kg, it's still heavier than the rice. So basically, you know that the rice is still lighter than 5 kg. So then if you put a 2 kg brick, what happens? This is a 2 kg brick and this is 2 kg rice. Since the weight is the same, it stays at the same level. So when you put a 2 kg brick, it will end up staying at the same level. Okay, so that's what the balance was used for. So it was a way of understanding the weight of things. So when people would buy things, for example, if I wanted to go to a store and buy say 2 kg rice, I had to know whether it was actually 2 kg rice. So it was used as a method of knowing the weight of the things that you buy. Right, so anyway, so that was why you had a balance. So why do we use this figure when we talk about judiciary and law? Basically, the point is you're trying to maintain a balance. And another important point is, if you give more preference to something, something else is being affected. So you can't let that happen either, right? You can't end up giving, more bias. If you like, so the thing about bias is, if I'm biased towards one person, the other person is losing out on some opportunity. That is a very important factor you need to understand when we talk about judiciary, when we talk about court and law. So for example, if you give a fake witness for your friend, okay, your friend did something wrong, you know it's wrong, but you stand as a witness because he's your friend after all, right? That's fine, that's a good thing. But then who is being affected is that other person who was hurt by the friend. So your fake witness that you did for this friend, it's affecting the other person. So that's sort of the system of this balance, what they try to show. Anyway, that we can leave. It's not really important. I just thought I'll talk about it. So yeah, anyway, this is like a rough introduction of what the judiciary is. This is what they do. This is what they're responsible for. Maintaining the law, settling disputes, things like that. Okay, that is for when I used to study about legislature, executive and judiciary. Judiciary was my favorite part when I was back in I think 9th or 8th. Anyway, moving ahead. The role of judiciary. Now, what does the judiciary do? What is their role? We'll be discussing 4 things. Okay, one is interpreting and applying the law. Second is safeguarding individual rights. Third is ensuring the rule of law. And fourth is judicial review. Okay, let's go into this one by one. Interpreting and applying the law. The judiciary interprets and applies the laws enacted by the legislature, ensuring their compatibility with the Constitution of India. Okay, so what does the judiciary do? Basically, interprets and applies the laws enacted by the legislature and ensures their compatibility with the Constitution of India. It resolves disputes and provides legal remedies to individuals and entities. Okay, and then another thing that they do, is get rid of sort of resolve disputes and provide legal remedies to individuals and entities. Safeguarding, and then another thing that the judiciary does is safeguarding individual rights. The judiciary protects the fundamental rights of citizens guaranteed by the Constitution. What are the fundamental rights the judiciary protects? Right to equality, freedom of speech, right to life and liberty. It acts as a guardian of these rights and can strike down laws that violate them. Okay, so this is what we had said, safeguarding individual rights. I told you, right, about fundamental rights. So it protects the fundamental rights of citizens. What are some examples of the fundamental rights? Right to equality, freedom of speech, right to life and liberty. Basically acts as a guardian of these rights. Ensuring the rule of law. Do you remember what rule of law was? I think we learned it when we learned about constitution. Just try to think of it. Tell me if you remember what rule of law was. Right, so basically this, we had studied this when we studied the chapter constitution, I believe. What we mean is that rule of law, everybody, when a law is set, it is set for everybody in the country. I mean, there might be certain exceptions, like if a law is set for certain groups of people, things like that, but generally laws are for everybody in the country. And a major what do you call it, you could say, the crux of the rule of law is that nobody is above law. May it be a president, may it be a prime minister, may it be anybody, nobody is above law, right? All of them, the law applies to all of them. This is what the rule of law basically means, right? So judiciary upholds the principle of the rule of law by ensuring that government actions adhere to legal provisions. So basically they ensure that, whatever the government does, the government actions adhere to legal provisions. It acts as a check on the executive and legislative branches, ensuring they function within the limits prescribed by the Constitution. Okay, so it's basically like a system of check on the other branches. So judiciary sort of makes sure that, the other branches function within the limits that are prescribed by the Constitution. So this is one of the reasons that I liked the judiciary when I used to study it in 9th grade. I told you, right? So because, even though all of these are independent branches, judiciary was one branch who sort of supervised the executive and the legislative. Right. So it's not others, it's the judiciary that sort of made sure that executive and legislative was doing their work properly. Coming to judicial review. Judiciary has the power to strike down particular laws. Now, this is also another reason why I like this judiciary. Very significant power. Power to strike down particular laws passed by the parliament if it believes that these are a violation of the basic structure of the constitution. This is called judicial review. Okay. So, power to strike down particular laws. Now, in what case can they do this? If it believes, whatever law is being, especially when there are amendments and a new law is being brought. So if the person believes that this law is a violation of some basic structure of the constitution, you can, the judiciary can strike down this law, and this is called judicial review. Basically, the judiciary is reviewing the law and decides to strike it down, right? So that's what we mean by judicial review. Okay, so this is all that we have under role of judiciary: interpreting and applying the law, safeguarding individual rights, ensuring the rule of law, judicial review. These are the 4 laws that we have under role of judiciary. Okay, maybe not 4 laws that we have, sort of 4 points that we have under role of judiciary. Coming to independent judiciary, India's judiciary operates independently of the executive and legislative branches, ensuring impartiality and fairness. Okay, like we said, it is independent. The Constitution of India establishes the independence of the judiciary by providing for security of tenure, fixed salaries, and removal only through a rigorous impeachment process. Judicial appointments are made by a collegium system, reducing executive influence. Okay, right. So what do we mean by all of this? So we said that, you know, all three of these are independent bodies, and the thing is, you know, judiciary is a body that sort of is a bit different from legislative and executive bodies, are sort of interconnected, you could say, in a way. Why? Like, okay, I'll ask you a question. Prime Minister, President, all of these come under which? Is it legislative? Is it legislature, or is it executive? Yeah, you tell me. Right, time's up. So these come under executive bodies, okay? But Prime Minister and President, they, you know, they are in very close contact to what happens in the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, right? It's something that you know, they are like in very close contact with what happens in the Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha. But these Rajya Sabha, Lok Sabha are come under the legislature. So between these two bodies, there is a sort of, you know, intermingling that happens. Judiciary is sort of the body that is the outsider, in a sense, you could say, right? So because of that, it is important to make sure that whoever is in the judiciary does not feel threatened by these people in the executive, or, you know, the bodies in the legislature. So what are the laws that, I mean, what are the, you know, provisions given to people in the judiciary by the Constitution of India? One is security of tenure. So basically, if a person gets in for a tenure, the tenure is fixed. He cannot be, you know, he cannot be just fired anytime. And then fixed salaries. The salary is fixed. It's not based on an increment. And, you know, if you make some member angry, it will not affect your salary. And removal only through a rigorous impeachment process. Why? This is something that's very important, because otherwise what happens is, sometimes it's you know, you might have a situation where somebody in the judiciary does something against, say, the Prime Minister or President, and, you know, as much as we talk about equality and rule of law, Prime Minister and President are very influential figures, right? So they could sort of just remove the person who is at this level, who is at the judicial level, right? So it is just sort of to get rid of, I mean, not like try and make that as minute as possible, you know. So the process is that there is a rigorous impeachment process that happens. Okay, judicial appointments are made by a collegium system, reducing executive influence. This is another thing. So appointments, when they are made, there is a collegium system that takes place. So why do you have a collegium system? Basically to reduce executive influence, to make sure that there is no executive influence, as in what we mean. Okay, wait. First I'll tell you what collegium system means. So usually it is like either the Chief Justice that may, you know, takes care of the judicial appointments, or like a body of ministers after the Chief Justice. Okay. So now, why do you need to reduce executive influence? What is the problem if there is some executive influence? The thing is, see, it's pretty obvious. It will affect the independence of the judiciary. So, say Prime Minister, President are part of the executive, right? So, if you have the Prime Minister or President choosing the person in the judiciary, okay, let's say the Prime Minister, President is the reason why the Chief Justice is, not the Chief Justice, let's say some Supreme Court judge is chosen, there is a very high chance that they could be biased, right? And they will also end up having an influence over this person that they chose, in a way, like in some way or other, because we're all humans at the end of the day, right? So there could be an influence. So to just get rid of any kind of such influence that there could be, there is a collegium system. Okay, so that's what we have. Moving on to the structure of courts in India. You have basically three different levels of courts: district, high, supreme. You can sort of guess what the hierarchy is. It's basically supreme at the highest position, and then high, and then district. Let's read about these. District court. The courts that most people interact with are called subordinate or district courts, or tehsil level courts. So basically there are three names: subordinate, district, tehsil level court. These are three names of district court. High court. Each state has a high court, which is the highest court of that state. Okay, the highest court of the state is called the high court. Supreme court. Supreme court is at the topmost level. The decisions made by the Supreme Court are binding on all other courts in India. It is located in New Delhi. Okay, so you have district court, you have high court, and then you have a Supreme Court. Supreme Court is the one that is at the topmost level. Now in India, we have an integrated judicial system, which means that the decision made by higher courts are binding on the lower courts. Okay. This is the system that we have in India. Basically, it is an integrated judicial system. Basically, what does that mean? So, for example, you move something, like, let's say you have a problem, you go to the district court. The district court says that you are all at the wrong of the issue, as in there's nothing, you are not on the right side, your enemy is on the right side, meaning you are on the wrong side. So then you move on to the high court. The high court says the same thing, or and then you move on to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court says that you are on the right side. So then that applies to all courts. So then how do you find out whether you're, like the one court has said you're on the right side, two other courts have said you're on the wrong side, right? But since the Supreme Court is at the highest position, what the Supreme Court says will overrule what the other courts have said. That's what we mean by a decision made by higher courts are binding on the lower courts. Similarly, if in the district court you are told that you are on the right side and then the high court says that you are on the wrong side, that also affects, because the high court is what you give more importance to. Okay, so that's what we have, structure of courts in India. Moving on, different branches of the legal system. What are some different branches of the legal system? You have criminal law, you have civil law. Now we'll be looking at the difference between these. What is criminal law and what is civil law? What does criminal law deal with? Conduct or acts that the law defines as offenses. Okay, so some acts that the law defines as quote unquote offenses. What are these acts? It could be theft, harassing a woman, dowry, murder. Okay, theft is an example. If you harass a woman, you take dowry. Dowry is a major something that is prohibited in our country, but it's also something that's very prevalent. So dowry, what is dowry? Dowry is basically the amount of, some amount of money, or something like a car or a fridge or something like that, that the wife's family gives to the husband when two people get married. So like a husband marries a wife and then the wife's side gives something to the husband, or it's usually like something that the husband asks for in order for marrying the wife. That's called a dowry. Okay, murder, all of these are examples. And moving on, it usually begins with the lodging of a first information report, FIR, with the police, who investigate the crime, after which a case is filed in the court. So how do you begin with your criminal law? You lodge an FIR with the police, and these police, they investigate the crime, and after the crime is investigated, a case is filed in the court. If found guilty, the accused can be sent to jail and also fined. Okay, now this is serious. Okay, so if anybody is found guilty, the accused can be sent to jail and also fined. Moving on to civil law, deals with any harm or injury to the rights of individuals. Okay, civil law is basically harm or injury to the so civil law is basically harm or injury to the rights of individuals. Okay, so you have disputes relating to sale of land, purchase of goods, rent matters, divorce cases. What is this? So basically, between two individuals, if there is some kind of dispute, not necessarily because of an offense. Like, see, what do we mean by offense? If somebody steals something of yours, if theft happens, then that is an offense, right? Theft is an offense. Similarly, such offenses can happen. But this is not exactly an offense. Like, you just have a dispute relating to sale of land. You're trying to sell a land, or let's say based land issues, like you and your brother or sister. Let's take your sister. So your sister says, a certain amount of land is actually yours and not his, and things like that. Purchase of goods, rent matters, divorce is also a very good example. So basically, you have some things when it comes to divorce, not exactly an offense on either part, but things that could happen between individuals, right? So all of these are dealt by the civil law. A petition has to be filed before the relevant court by the affected party only. So how do you move ahead with the civil law? A petition. You need to file a petition before the relevant court, whichever court you think is relevant. It could be the district court, it could be the high court, it could be the Supreme Court. You file a petition. Who files the petition? Only the affected party. Okay, the affected party is the one who files the petition. So if you believe that you are on the affected side, you can file the petition. The court gives the specific relief asked for. Okay, so the court gives the specific relief that has been asked for. So that's how civil law works. Moving on. Access to courts. The Indian judiciary ensures access to justice for all citizens. Okay, you have something called access to courts. Indian judiciary ensures, so the Indian judiciary ensures access to justice for all citizens. Okay, this is what we mean by access to courts. People can approach the courts through various means. So okay, you see that you have access, okay, but how do you approach the court? Basically, what do we mean by there is access to justice? Any citizen can approach the court. Okay, but how do you approach the court? There are different means. You can file petitions, engage lawyers, or utilize alternative dispute resolution mechanism such as meditation. Not meditation, mediation and arbitration. Okay, I said meditation. No, right. So if you want to, okay, this you can file petitions. File petition is basically you have something in the written form which you file. You can get lawyers, or there are some other dispute mechanisms like mediation, arbitration, right? So basically, getting a person in between or using certain things. Okay, moving on. Legal procedures. Okay, but another problem with legal procedures is that they involve a lot of money and paperwork, also a great deal of time. So in response to this, the Supreme Court in the early 1980s devised a mechanism of PIL, public interest litigation. So here there isn't much that you learn, but when you study NCERT, you learn much more about PIL. That is your public interest litigation. Okay. Public interest litigation. Basically, this is like a mechanism of certain things to increase access to justice, to make justice more accessible. The method of, for some people, reducing the money, making them aware of the rules and laws that there are, things like that. For example, especially people in the economically weaker sections of the society. Speaking of this, one thing I wanted to mention, when we learn about certain things like executive, judiciary, legislative, and we learn about, rights that are given to citizens, you need to understand that these are things that we have at an ideal level. These are things that the constitution prescribes. Okay, the constitution says that these things should happen, but do people actually get it? Does this actually happen is a whole different case story. So like, you might have the right to primary education, but do all the people in India have the are all the people in India able to access primary education? Are there people who are still being forced into child labor? Yes, there are. So for all of these rules that we have, and we talked about independent judiciary, right? Is the judiciary really independent? Have there been cases where the judiciary has been partial because of some influence or power that they had from the executive? There have been cases. So when we learn, these are things that we learn in theory. What we mean to say when we talk about independent judiciary or legislative or executive is that these are the ideal things. These are how things have been written, how things have been set up. What actually happens, what is actually happening is a different story. Okay, but this is, so even when you talk about different articles and laws in the constitution, these are just things that should ideally be given to people. We have a right to access these laws, but whether we let's say talk about right to freedom of speech and expression, are all people getting the right? Have there been cases of people who have been deprived of the right? Yes. So you need to understand that. So when we learn, what we learn is in theory what was the ideal structure that was envisioned by the people who wrote this. People who made the constitution and all of that. What happens in reality is a different thing, and what we need to try as citizens is the first thing, like I said before. Firstly, you need to be aware of your rights, because you will not know that you are being exploited unless you know that unless you know what's happening to you, right? So first you need to know what your rights are. You need to know what the rights of the people around you are, and you need to see if you are exploiting somebody. And then when you're sure that you're not, only then can we actually say that we have done our part. Right, so not just you being exploiting somebody. If you see somebody else being exploited, if you see some worker being exploited, a worker working in a construction site where there are no safety measures at all, no safety measures, this goes against the labor acts. But there are multiple places where this happens. So when you see something like that, you also need to speak against it, which is why it is important to learn subjects like civics. Okay, so anyway, that's up until the access to courts. The rest we will learn it a little later, as in for the next session. Okay, we can end the session here.